Do you know how rage is triggered in your life? Does it come from external sources, for example, when you feel misunderstood, betrayed, or devalued in some way? Or does it come from internal sources, when, for example, you feel ashamed, or you feel as if you're being a failure in some way, or you're feeling immensely frustrated about something? Does your rage tend to turn more on yourself, or does it show more externally? In today's wilderness conversation, we're going to be examining 3 stages of rage. The rage itself, how you can release rage, and how you can actually revolutionize rage. In order to do this, I'm going to be introducing you to Astria, the angel of rage. And Astria is one of the 52 angels of the wildernesses that I have created, relating to some of the most severe emotions that one goes through during these stages of recovering from a nervous breakdown. And today we're going to be specifically looking at rage in relation to perfectionism. I'm Karen Packwood, founder of the Spirit Spa Sanctuary, an online sanctuary dedicated to supporting you if you're in the early stages of recovering from a nervous breakdown, helping you to understand why the breakdown happened to you and how to identify your next natural steps towards building a flourishing life for yourself. So before we take a deeper look at Astria and all that she has to offer us today, let's remind ourselves of definitions of perfectionism and the 2 definitions of rage. So here at the Spirit Spa, the definition of perfectionism is where you absolutely demand of yourself absolute 100% commitment, but not only just 100% commitment, but also you expect everything to be done to the highest standard possible, if not better, often to completely unattainable levels. And if you don't get that, that's when you can enter into all sorts of overwhelming emotions, such as rage, which of course is what our focus is today. So there are 2 accepted definitions of rage, and I have them written down, so I am going to read to make sure that I actually say them accurately. So definition number 1 is that rage is a violent and uncontrollable anger. A violent, uncontrollable anger. And the second definition is that rage is a vehement desire or passion. And I'm sure that every single one of you who is in the early stages of recovering from a breakdown will actually identify in one shape or form with both of those definitions. The reality is that there are many different types of rage in terms of how it's expressed and how it's actually felt within you as well. So for example, I'm sure that some of you can understand confused rage, where you might react impulsively as an impulsive meltdown because actually you feel incredibly overwhelmed by circumstances or very confused by what's going on. Sometimes rage, particularly in young children, for example, rage can be triggered in that kind of element of frustration. But as adults, particularly when we're in very stressful situations, many of us can react to situations in which we feel confused or overwhelmed by having meltdowns that kind of reveal themselves in a state of rage. I'm sure many of you will understand when I say white rage, and that point where you've gone beyond feeling anger to the point where you are so upset by something that's either happening to you or within you that it's almost as if you can't talk, you can't speak, you're in this kind of like incredibly seething, silent, bubbling place where you might not actually be able to express your rage. Perhaps it comes out in different ways though, maybe in forms of passive aggressive behaviour, snidey comments or little snarky looks or whatever. But you know, white rage kind of reveals itself in quite interesting ways. However, for many people in the early stages of recovering from a nervous breakdown, I believe that one of the most common forms of rage is actually repressed rage. And that's rage that is relating to trauma that happened to you very long a time ago, wounds that have been unhealed. Perhaps you haven't had an opportunity to share that traumatic story and being believed, heard, seen and respected within it. Perhaps you haven't had an opportunity to reveal testimony around that particular experience. Perhaps you haven't had people who have been willing to witness the pain and suffering in relation to that particular trauma or traumas that actually led to the nervous breakdown actually happening. Maybe you have rage because you feel you're not healing quickly enough. Many people in the early stages of recovery find it hard to accept that this is a very slow journey. It's a very precious journey. It's a sacred journey. But of course the temptation is, because there is fear about never being well again, that there's a desire to actually speed up the process of healing and recovery rather than actually breathing into the slowness of it. And that can bring immense feelings of impatience and rage towards oneself. More than anything else. But I think it's important to understand that wherever the rage is coming from, wherever its roots are, whether it's an external manifestation or reason, triggering, or internal, I think rage often comes with overwhelming terror and a sense of helplessness and disempowerment. And it's, I think, when those things have become quite out of balance that we can then trigger into like feelings of rage, whether that's rage that we express or rage that we repress. Now, of course, the reality is in society, many people are very frightened of rage, so they're frightened of expressing it, and actually they're also frightened of being on the receiving end of it as well. And in one of the first definitions that I used, the two words were violent and uncontrollable. And understandably, within society, those are two things that actually people feel very frightened of, and they don't actually want to be part of. But sometimes there is a place, I'm not saying that there is a place for being violent and uncontrollable, but there needs sometimes to be a safe space where incredibly strong feelings of rage can come to the surface, can be expressed. And that's partly what we're going to be talking about in the release part of this process. How do we take our rage? How do we connect with it? And how do we express it and release it in a way that is safe, healthy, and beneficial to us? So before we actually go into exploring more deeply how we actually can connect with and release our rage, let's take a little bit look at Astria, the angel of rage. And you can see that she is very, very beautifully coloured. She's vibrant, she's bare-chested, she's got her mouth wide open. This person is definitely allowing herself to release her feelings and her thoughts. I often imagine that she's just letting off the loudest scream that one could possibly imagine, which sometimes that's what we would just really love to do, isn't it? We have very few spaces in our life in which we can just let ourselves scream or howl and just let our feelings out through sound in such a wild way, if you like, or primal way, should I say. But Astria is doing it for us. She's there, and on the one hand we can see that she is full of rage. She is feisty, this woman, isn't she? She's strong, she's powerful. We can see that perhaps she's a little bit anarchic. There she is with her beautiful Mohican haircut. She's naked, she is bare-chested, but she also has this incredible, her wings here are the blue wings here, these blue wings of flight. They bring a gentleness with them. Blue is the colour of trust. So although she's actually in what could be deemed a state of violence or uncontrollable rage, she has these incredibly strong wings grounding her, rooting her, protecting her, keeping her safe, but also giving her space to expand and flee as well if she needs to. She's got this beautiful gold energy. You can see this. This is just coming from what we call the solar plexus chakra. The solar plexus chakra is related to anger and where we hold strong and repressed anger. But here we're allowing the flow of the anger to just come out, but it's coming out in a golden torrent. There's nothing violent or angry about this. This is a beautiful, energetic flow of power and energy. And this is one of the things that I love to talk about in terms of Astria, because yes, she is the angel of rage, and we've talked about rage being violent and uncontrollable, but let's think about that second definition, where it's also a vehement passion and desire. And those of you that regularly watch my videos will know that whenever I talk about the difficult feelings that we experience with a breakdown, there is always the positive experience kind of riding in tandem with that, should we allow ourselves to connect with it. And here, this is what Astria gives us the opportunity to do. She gives us the opportunity to see rage being expressed in its full power, in its full beauty. Her chest is open, her arms are expanded, her mouth is wide open. She's allowing her strong, passionate feelings to come out. She's expressing them. But then we also know we have this pink and gentle colour around us. We have this strong flow of the golden colour. And this is where we connect in with the empowerment, because once we connect in with the positive energy of rage, that's when we can bring ourselves to a resolution. And the resolution is a sense of empowerment where we can own what we're feeling betrayed about, what we're feeling misunderstood by. We don't have to obliterate anybody. We don't have to annihilate anybody. We can stand firm and rooted and grounded in our feelings of abandonment, betrayal, stating them clearly about how we feel, not in any negative way, but owning them. And once we can then bring ourselves into connection with owning our own feelings, we don't then have to kind of allow ourselves to be uncontrollable or violent. We can bring ourselves to a place of inner strength, inner power, inner empowerment. And you can see all around us, we have the beautiful branches of these trees. And if you look closely, you can see that her hands are actually like the branches of trees. And you might notice that today I'm actually filming this. I'm actually in a bush. I'm actually in a rhododendron bush. So all of the actual foliage is outside, but I'm right in the heart of it. And you can see these beautiful twisted branches that are supporting the foliage, which will in spring will then come into flower again. And this is kind of the energy of Astria. She's there, she's holding what's going on underneath for you. The power, the rage, the feelings of helplessness, any of the difficult feelings that you are feeling. But what she's also holding on to is the fact that above all of that, or leading to that, once you've engaged in a grounded, rooted, empowered way, you can then begin to flower back out in your world, holding your own in relation to people who have mistreated you, how you've mistreated yourself, how your perfectionism has sabotaged you, overwhelmed you, demeaned you in some way, shamed you in some way. So this is Astria, and this is what she's bringing to us today in relation to rage, and specifically in relation to perfectionism. But of course you can actually widen that out to perfectionism in your life in general, in terms of recovering from your breakdown. So let's move on now to today's wilderness journaling activity, where I'm going to invite you to do an Angel in the Wilderness journal and sketching prompt. So I hope you have your journals, pens, crayons, etc. with you. I'm going to now ask you a series of questions. Maybe make a note of the questions, and then what I'm going to do is there will be a 15-minute nature meditation with music at the end of this video, so that you can then begin to actually answer the questions in your own private, quiet and creative time. So the first question that I have for you is relating to the definition of rage. Obviously, I shared with you some dictionary definitions of rage, but I wonder if you could come up with your own sentence or paragraph to define what rage means to you, because I do feel that it can mean different things to different people. And I think part of the owning of it, part of this exercise, and the empowerment of owning it, could really come from you actually having a very clear understanding and definition of what rage means to you. And I would love it if you could actually share your definition of rage in the comments, or email me at karen@karenpackwood.com. I think it would be very interesting to see how different people define rage. The next thing I'd like you to do is I'd like you to spend some time journaling on how rage shows up in your life. And it might be interesting to think of this in different ways. So for example, you might want to think about how rage showed up for you when you were a child. Were you allowed to express difficult feelings, or did you have to keep them all really contained? Did that eventually lead to rage? Did you experience rage? Were people behaving in a way, in a raging way towards you? So just take a moment to sort of think about how rage showed up for you when you were a young child. And then of course you can move that into your teenage years. How did rage show up for you as a teenager? What was going on internally for you in terms of rage? And also, what were you experiencing externally in terms of rage? And of course, we're really looking at there about healthy expressions of displeasure. Was that demonstrated to you positively, or was it demonstrated to you negatively? What did you learn about expressing feelings of displeasure? How did you learn that you could actually express feelings of displeasure or not express feelings of displeasure? I think it's very important and helpful to have some kind of a reflection on what you learned and what you were taught and what you believed, and then what you internalized during your childhood and your teenage years. Of course, then the next obvious thing to think about is how rage has showed up for you as an adult. And of course, it really depends on how old you are, how much, how many decades you have to look at. If it was me, it would be a long exercise. But I still think it's quite important to just don't overwhelm yourself with this. This could be an exercise that could become quite emotional, and it could become quite overwhelming. So do contain it in a way that feels right for you, whether you just do it in small chunks or you just limit it to a set amount of time, or it's something that you come back to periodically. But it is helpful to look at how did rage show up in your young adulthood, mid-adulthood, and older adulthood if you're at that stage. And again, not only in terms of what was going on within you, but actually what was going on externally to you in terms of how you expressed yourself in terms of rage, but then how rage was demonstrating and manifesting itself around you as well. And of course, there you can look at that in different circumstances, whether it's your relationship with intimate partners, your children, your work colleagues, strangers on the street. Where have been flashpoints around rage? What shows up for you? What are the first things that come to your mind? What do you have to dig deep for? What have you forgotten about maybe? And just, treat this as a meditation task. You can just kind of come into connection with your breath and just ask your body to remind you anything that would be helpful for you to know at this moment in time about your own experiences of rage, what triggered the rage, what was helpful in terms of expressing displeasure, what wasn't helpful, and so on and so forth. So just begin to have a really good brain dump, if you like, around rage in your adult life. I think for many people who have a lot of rage, or repressed rage, or just silently held rage, or even people that have impulsive meltdowns of rage, it's so helpful to identify the feelings that were going on underneath it for you, or are going on underneath it for you. Of course, the most obvious thing is that people talk about rage in relation to anger, but I actually think there's much more to it than that. For me, I think often I become quite rageful when I'm feeling very frightened, or whether I'm feeling very powerless, or I feel very betrayed. So I really think it would be helpful for you to identify what are the emotions that are underneath your rage, what's triggering that rage. Now take a few moments to think about rage in relation to perfectionism, how perfectionism is showing up in your life, and where are the elements of rage around that? When do the flashpoints of rage show up for you? And is that rage being externalized? Are you directing that out to others? And is that fair? Is there fair rage going on there? Do people deserve to have you being angry with them? Or is that something you're projecting out onto them? Or is the rage being internalized? Are you turning it in on yourself? And if so, how are you doing that? I think it's very helpful to understand when you are turning rage in on yourself, how is that being detrimental to you? What is it hindering? What is it sabotaging? What is it making you feel? How does it make you feel emotionally, physically, spiritually, intellectually, psychologically, etc.? So really have a good delve into how rage in relation specifically to perfectionism is showing up in your life internally and externally. And I know it's asking you to be very honest with yourself about areas that may feel very uncomfortable. None of us like admitting perhaps perhaps that we've got things wrong at times with ourselves or with other people. But it's the first step to actually releasing rage or releasing uncontrollable or uncomfortable rage. So be kind, gracious and gentle to yourself. And like I say, don't overwhelm yourself. Take it gently and in small chunks. But do begin to just unpick how rage is showing up for you in relation to perfectionism. And so as you have met Astria throughout the recording today, through this episode, you've seen her in all her glory. And this is an artist's depiction of my version of rage. I've worked with an artist to create these illustrations. And so I've kind of given her what kind of came to me when I thought about rage. But what I'd like you to do is I'd like you to think about what rage looks like for you. And it doesn't have to be a person. It doesn't have to be an angel. It could just be a shape. It could be a color. It could be it could be a piece of furniture. It could be a tree. It could be anything you like. It could be just a random splodge. But let's just see what comes to you when you draw rage. What does it look like? And you might be very surprised to see what comes in. If you think, oh, well, I can't draw, I'm inviting you to just start doodling and just allow yourself to see what comes to you, what kind of doodle wants to come to you on the page, what shape, what shading do you want on it? What colours does it want to have? Does it begin to reveal anything to you? Does it begin to tell you anything? Does it begin to inform you on anything? So allow yourself to connect in with the artwork, whatever level that's at. But it's a really good opportunity for you to have a visual, external image of what your rage looks like. And you can revisit at times, and you might find that it actually changes as well. And you might find that you want to give it a name. I've talked before about giving different internal elements of ourselves names. We know that this is Astria, the angel of rage. But what name would you give your rage, and why? And again, I'd love to know that, so please share that in the comments below or email me at karen@karenpackwood.com. So what we've just done in that previous activity is we've really connected ourselves with how rage feels in its kind of probably more negative forms, and how it's presenting itself to us internally and externally, specifically in relation to perfectionism. But of course, none of us want to stay in the difficult connection with rage. We want to transition, evolve, transform and move beyond that. But how do we do that? Well, it's a difficult process, but it can be done. And what I'm about to share with you now is just one exercise that's like a tip of the iceberg exercise. This is a much bigger project than just a 15-minute exercise. But I want you to think about the word empowerment. If we begin to think about owning our rage and transforming into a state of empowerment, where we're not in that uncontrollable anger in relation to something, but we are owning a situation that doesn't feel right for us, and we're claiming it, and we're saying, I am unhappy with you because, I am unhappy with myself because. If we can come into an empowered statement like that, we're beginning to actually transition from the uncontrollable elements of rage, and that's where the pain and the suffering is. So what I would like you to do is I would like you to think about the word empowerment. What does that word mean to you? We saw with Astria, she's very strong. She has that bare chest. She has her arms held wide. She's not in a weakened state. She's very, very strong. Her mouth is wide open. That's quite a vulnerable state for her to be. She's got this kind of quite anarchic kind of hairstyle. And I'm not suggesting that we all start going around with anarchic hairstyles, but what we need to do is really think about what does empowerment mean to us, because if we don't know what that means to us, how can we be it? How can we become empowered if we don't actually know what that means? And so many of us haven't been allowed to be empowered. We weren't allowed to be empowered when we were children, and then we haven't been allowed to be empowered in many ways as adults, and then we actually disempower ourselves so many times, particularly people who have experienced a breakdown. There's so many examples of disempowerment that led to the breakdown. So we're going to start to really claim the word empowerment. I want you to spend some time. What does that word mean to you? What's your definition of empowerment? What is your statement of empowerment? To me, empowerment means, and I want you to write that strongly somewhere. Put it up somewhere where you can see it. Have it in your bag, have it in your wallet. This is what empowerment means to me today. And now I'd like you to think about 3 key empowerment words, specifically in relation to perfectionism. Sorry, lost the word for a minute there. So for example, 3 disempowering words might be I feel a failure, and I feel ashamed of myself, and I feel lost. But I might switch those now. If I was going to become quite empowered in relation to my perfectionism and being more friendly to it, if I'm doing something to soothe my rage and ease my rage, specifically if it's rage that I'm directing towards myself, I might begin to say things like, in my state of empowerment, I feel quite gentle. I am gentle to myself. In order to be empowered within myself, I'm kind to myself. In order to feel empowered within myself, I'm honest or I'm truthful. I'm polite but truthful. I might also say things like I'm proud of myself, or I give myself permission to be proud of myself for tackling this issue, even if it feels overwhelming or difficult to me. I give myself permission to be gentle in this experience where I'm actually very cross with somebody. That doesn't mean to say that you deny any elements that you feel need confronting, but one can do it in a graceful and kind and more compassionate way to yourself, as well as everybody else. Because of course, when we act in an uncontrollable and violent way, and I don't necessarily mean physically violent, but verbally violent maybe, or just spiritually violent, that does impact on us negatively as well. So let's think of words in which that make you feel empowered and as if you're being incredibly kind to yourself, but still strong and still honest and still truthful about situations, whether they're internal situations or external situations. I'd like you to create 3 statements for that, and again, please share those with me either in the comments below or email me at karen@karenpackwood.com. I'd now like you to play with those for a few days. I'd like you to each morning say to yourself, imagine yourself looking in the mirror. Imagine that you've got Astria, the angel of rage, looking back at you. And what guidance is she giving you? And I want you to say to yourself your empowered statements. Today, I am going to be kind to myself. Today, I am going to be gentle with myself. Today, I am going to feel proud of myself. I want you to have these really positive statements because they empower you to connect with anything that you're feeling unhappy about in a more positive way. And in a later episode, I will create an episode on how you can actually begin to express displeasure to people who may be causing you experiences where you feel rageful in a kind of an assertive way. But today I just really want to focus on you coming into a grounded, empowered angel of the wilderness. I am connected with my empowered rage, my empowerment in general, specifically in relation to my perfectionism. I kind of like that as we began talking about empowerment, the wind has really started to whip up around me. I'm hoping that the quality of the recording is going to be good enough. Before I begin to take you through the releasing rage elements of today's video, I'd like to just share with you some ways in which you could work with me. So the angels of the wilderness are angels that I have channeled from my work with Spirit, and you'll always see in my comments box below an invitation for you to do a Spirit Spa VIP one-to-one consultation with me. And in those consultations, I will take you on a personal journey of healing and recovery, and I'll enable you to connect in with your own personal journey of recovering and help you to work out your next natural steps towards rebuilding a flourishing life for yourself. So do look in the comments box below and think about whether that is something that you would be interested in, and let me know. Let me know. I don't know what else I was going to say after that, so that was what I was going to say. So once you have your 3 statements and you've got into the habit of every morning looking at yourself, imagining Astria, the wilderness of rage, kind of giving you her strong, vibrant, empowered energy, I want you to just notice how that begins to feel for you physically. What changes do you feel in your body? What changes do you feel in your mind? What changes do you feel in your heart? Making these positive empowered statements to ourselves really shifts the energy, and can really alter how we feel about ourselves, about our lives and other people. So I'm encouraging you to really take note of it. How does it feel for you? You might want to journal on it, or you just might want to notice it. But I'd even notice it if you're at the stage of being able to walk around yet, whether that's in your house or outside. I do invite you to just notice how you feel when you walk. Has anything changed in your walk? Are you more upright, or are you slouching in some way? Or notice when you say a rage statement to an empowered statement, what shifts? What feels different for you? Take a note of it. Do you speak differently? Do you look differently? Do your eyes look different? What do you dress differently? What happens? What shifts take place when you come from that shifting rage into a place of empowerment? So I'm Karen Packwood. This is the Spirit Spa, an online sanctuary dedicated to supporting you if you're in the early stages of recovering from a nervous breakdown, helping you to identify why the breakdown happens to you so that you can work out your next steps towards rebuilding a flourishing life for yourself. I'm going to invite you now to go into the 15 minutes of nature meditation, to journal on these questions. It is a lot. Break it down. It's not going to all be done in 15 minutes. Come back to it regularly as a regular practice, or as and when you need it. But please, if you have any questions about your recovery, don't forget to email me at karen@karenpackwood.com, or in the comments box below, and then I can record a video for you in response. I'm wishing you a very peaceful day. And Astria would like you to know that you have... Oh, she's upside down. That's so funny, because sometimes we can feel a bit upside down in our recovery process, can't we? But anyway, she wants you to know that it's completely possible to transform your rage, your very powerful rage. Don't ever feel bad about your rage, because it's there to help you and guide you in terms of areas in your life that aren't right, and people who aren't treating you correctly, and now you're not treating yourself correctly, and that's what you're in the process of identifying with today's exercise. But she wants you to know that you can definitely connect in with that solar plexus rage energy and allow it to flow with beautiful, golden, strong, empowered, open-armed, bare-chested pride, strength and glory. So yes, from us both, wishing you a peaceful, proud, strong, empowered day.